go through the service, I want to make sure that we all connect to the profound poetry that's behind our words. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian. Adonai is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. Adonai will guard your going and coming, now and forever. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'em Adonai, ose shamayim, shamayim, ve'aretz. Al yitin lamod raglecha, al yadum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomerecha. Adonai tzilchad yad yemimecha. Yomam shemesh lokecha. Vayareach aleya. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra. Yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmar tzedkecha uvoecha. Me'ata ve'yad olam. Shalom. I'm Rabbi Alan Finkel, and I am honored to lead this service on behalf of the Shor family, as together we honor the passing of Izzy Shor, the son of Haimi Shor and Rose Hellman Shor, Yitzchak ben Chaim Verachel, who left us on Monday, August the 5th, 2024, which we will mark on the Hebrew calendar as the first day of Av, 5784, at the age of 85. Izzy was predeceased by his parents and by his wife Rachel, or Shelley, Karp Shor, who passed away in 2007, with whom Izzy raised their three wonderful daughters. He leaves behind his brother-in-law Ian Karp and his wife Janet Karp and their children. And Izzy is survived by his partner Sonia Kaplan and by his three daughters and their families, Marilyn Shor and her husband Roberto Dominguez, Carla Shor, and Cheryl Shor. And the next 8 loves of his life, his grandchildren, Emilia and Silvio, Ethan and Kevin, and Lila, Noah, Hugo, and Joseph. Izzy's passing, which we discovered late Monday here in Winnipeg, was sudden and unexpected and far away from his children. And these last 2.5 days have been frantic and hectic, with the family not only having to deal with their profound shock and grief, but compounded by all 3 of Izzy's children and grandchildren living in Vancouver and Montreal, and having to make their way to Winnipeg and booking flights and managing delayed flights, and at the same time, doing this so important work of planning, of reaching out to all of the people in Izzy's world, those of us here and online, with the abiding commitment to make this day just right. In these moments, we are reminded of our central Jewish teachings on Gemilut Chasadim, the 7 acts of loving kindness, the first 2 dealing with death, and how our very first responsibility is to honor the deceased and placing it before our desire to stop and grieve and mourn. From that moment, late Monday evening, until this moment here at the funeral, his family have put their lives on hold, taking care of the details, the travel, the writing, the phone calls, the pallbearers, travel arrangements, and so much more. Each of these acts honoring the last steps of the journey of their dad and grandfather, Izzy Shor. And it will be from this moment on that the mourners now wear their torn ribbons, the symbols of Kriya, that tell them and tell us that it is okay now to grieve, and where we as a community will step in to perform the second of the 7 acts of loving kindness as we now willingly commit to comfort the mourners. I do want to express my thanks, especially to Carla, for taking on such a huge responsibility as the Vancouver to Winnipeg connection, and for the many wonderful stories that she told me about her dad. And again, I want my thanks as well to Marilyn, Carla, and Cheryl for the time we had with each other this morning. Again, more stories, more planning, more thoughts, more love, and more sadness. The eulogy, which is where we are right now, is an essential element of a Jewish funeral. It's a time for us to mark the impact that a person had in the world, a taste of the good people that they were, and of the memories that we will all carry forward of Izzy Shor for the rest of our own lives. 4 of us will speak this morning. First, me, and then Marilyn, Carla, and Cheryl, and I will follow up then with some concluding remarks. So with Carla's permission, I will offer stories of Izzy's early years. Izzy was born here in Winnipeg on November 11th, 1938, almost 86 years ago. His parents, Jaime and Rose, had immigrated separately with their families to Winnipeg from Eastern Europe to get away from the rising troubles that were surrounding them. They met and married here in Winnipeg. Izzy was their only child. And in the most honored Jewish tradition, they passed on the values of education to Izzy. Izzy, as it turns out, was very smart. And he went to university where he graduated as an electrical engineer and started his career with Manitoba Hydro, which would continue for the next 40 years. Izzy's parents had each grown up in the Orthodox traditions of Eastern Europe, and this would continue in their home where they were very observant. Izzy's mother came from a large family, and so it was that Izzy did not grow up alone, surrounded rather by close first cousins, a lot of them apparently, and surrounded by Jewish values and a sense of community which would permeate his view of the world for the rest of his life that would be certainly passed on to his children and grandchildren as well. Speaking from personal experience, we don't always follow the paths of our parents. I went from Orthodox to something else to Reform in my own pathing. From the Torah, though, we learned that this was Abraham's path as well, and in fact, it is the Jewish path. He left his parents' home at age 75 to find a new path and eventually a new physical and spiritual home. And this was Izzy's story as well. He chose to redefine himself as secular rather than religious or observant. And instead, he expressed his Judaism through ethical living and in the quality of the relationships that were important to him. And there were, indeed, relationships profoundly important to Izzy. He was blessed with 2 loves in his life. Shelley, early in his life, and Sonia in his later years. He first met Rochelle, or Shelley Karp, at a party when they were both in their 20s. She was, by all accounts, a social butterfly, and he was more reserved. They spoke a bit on and off during the party as she flitted in and out of his presence. But at the end of the party, it turns out that he had a car and she needed a lift home. In time, they dated and got married and had what I've heard simply described to me was a really good marriage, bringing into their lives their 3 daughters, Marilyn, Carla, and Cheryl. And I think at this point, since this is the story that before they're around, I'll turn the story over right now to Marilyn to start us off with her words. And then we'll follow that with Carla and with Cheryl. Marilyn?
My dad, he was always the one to make speeches or talk publicly. I'm less comfortable, but I feel he deserves these words and thoughts from me about him to be shared. Daddy, Zeta, Izzy, patient, dependable, generous, kind, intelligent, in Yiddish, a mensch, a gitinish. These are some words to describe my dad. You could always count on his support. No matter if he understood or agreed with my ideas or choices, I always knew I had his support and his love. Emmy told me that her Zeta was a serious person at times who also had a silly side. He showed this when he invented stories about the palapa trees. He told his grandkids to flap their ears to help a plane go faster. He also loved enticing all his young Einiklach to stick out their tongues by saying tongue out to them. I wonder now, who will indulge me in my love for Saskatoons and Goldeye by bringing them to me from Winnipeg? With whom can I argue about the merits of homeopathic and natural remedies? Who can I debate the values of believing in a creator or a God? Who can I share our love of Louise Penny mystery books? Who do I buy chocolate truffles, dark chocolate truffles on Father's Day? Who will carry on the memories of a time long ago before we were born or we were little kids? We, his family, are now the keepers of these memories and the memories of the time spent with him and the stories about him. We all love you, Izzy, Daddy, Zeta, and your spirit, if you believe in this or not, will live on in all our hearts and thoughts forever.
Carla?
My dad was a reassuring presence in my life. He so enjoyed being that calm person sat among all his chaotic grandchildren. But it goes back further than that. Every time he and my mom were going out in the evening, my mom took forever to get ready, but Dad would just wait. Sometimes he'd wait in the car, but he waited. My parents and I had our ups and downs, but Dad and I were able to move forward, and he played an important part in my kids' lives. Last summer, he and I went to Victoria and spent a couple wonderful days with my son Kevin and his girlfriend Quinn. And last November, he traveled to Victoria again to take part in the ceremony marking the conclusion of my son Ethan's engineering degree. He was so proud, my dad, to present Ethan with his iron ring, and it meant so much to all of us. My dad was the guy who always fixed things. In our childhood home, he had a workshop filled with carpentry and other DIY tools. Later, he became the computer tech support guy for all of his friends. That's in fact how he hooked up with Sonia, his partner, Sonia Kaplan. He helped her with her laptop, and next we knew they were keeping company. Sonia and Dad were lucky to find each other and to have each other during the pandemic particularly. It was lovely for Dad to find romance again, and I know Sonia feels his loss as much as anyone here. My dad could also have emotional moments. When I was a teenager, he bought a new car that had a manual transmission. And even way back in those days, kids, manual was not that common, and when I learned to drive, I didn't know how to use a stick shift. I learned automatic. So I asked my dad to teach me how to drive his car. My calm, relaxed father seemed like the perfect teacher. On our first lesson, I started the car, and I tried to get into first gear, but I stalled it, and it kind of jumped a little, and my dad got so upset. My calm father was shouting and kind of freaking out at me. He never did teach me how to drive a standard. Ironically, my always emotional mother taught me, and she was really calm doing it. My father had a complicated relationship with God. He had always told us that he did not want to be buried. He wanted to be cremated, but of course that is not the traditional Jewish way. He would say, well, if you don't cremate me, then I'll come back to haunt you. And we would say, okay, come back, it'll be nice to see you. You may have heard, but my father will be cremated per his wishes, but as you can see, we're still having a Jewish funeral. If he comes back to haunt us, we will be very happy to see him. And one last final memory of my dad. There's a photo that we have from a recent trip to BC, where Dad, in his Tilly hat and sunglasses, is standing at the edge of a pond, hand clasped behind his back, looking contentedly at the ducks in the water. It's an iconic dad moment, and it's how I want to remember him most. Thanks.
Cheryl?
Nearly everyone who knew my dad probably knew him to be kind, gentle, helpful, and welcoming. He might have let it be known to some of you that he had a dark sense of humor, an inquisitive nature, and he was fiercely independent. You may not have known that he could play a fine game of pool. I just learned that a couple months ago. That when he was about 13 years old, he rode his bicycle, which he told me he used to do all the time, which I also didn't know, drove all the way from the north end all the way to Assiniboine Park. You may not have known that he loved a good story and would endlessly read books to his grandchildren with such wonderful theatrics that the adults around would gather to listen. he was a very private person. And there was probably an Izzy that only he was familiar with. Sometimes, or maybe often, keeping emotions inside, safely underground for himself. Thank you for the Kleenex. He never judged others. He modeled how to live an honorable and good life through his actions. Be true to yourself. Take care of those around you. Travel. Learn. Find love again at 80. And of course, eat plenty of dark chocolate. Maybe he told you this at some point, but my dad always joked that he wanted to be reincarnated as a house cat, even though, of course, he staunchly believed that there was no life after death. Daddy, I hope you have now found a nice comfy couch to curl up on and are being treated like the king you are.
Thank you for each of you for honoring us with your stories. One of the first questions I asked Carla when we first talked was about how she would describe her dad. And she paused for a moment and said with some certainty, "He was a nice man." And later, when I spoke with the three sisters on Zoom and told them that story, Meryl and Cheryl were both startled with the answer, and then they both nodded and smiled. Izzy Shore was a nice man. And it showed up everywhere through the stories that we've been hearing and the many more that have yet to be told. I've been hearing about 23 years of visits to grandchildren, no matter where they were. Just this incredible sense of connection with the people around him, just to be present with them. His life was about his three girls and the two loves of his life, and about travel and connection and breakfast clubs. And it would be about how his Judaism flowed into him and through him and into the world around him. Izzy may have described himself as secular, but he nonetheless centered Judaism within his family. All three girls went to Parrott School, two went on to Joseph Walensky Collegiate, and his values were transmitted intergenerationally. Judaism became parts of their daughters' lives as well, and even with their intermarriages, his grandchildren in turn had their own B'nai mitzvahs. So, how do we understand Izzy's sense of Judaism? Rabbi Akiva, soon after the destruction of the Second Temple, was asked to describe the Torah in one sentence. And he turned to the very middle of the Torah in Parshat Kedoshim for his answer. Love your neighbor as yourself. So for Rabbi Akiva, it was not ritual observance or kashrut or keeping Shabbat or even a relationship with God that mattered. For him, a Torah way of life, a Jewish way of life, was based on how we connect with the people around us. And that everything else in the Torah was there to help us serve that purpose. And this is how Izzy lived. He chose the parts of Judaism that mattered most to him and lived them fully. He appreciated the different paths of those around him and judged them not. And this is why his children, in turn, have chosen to honor Izzy's known wishes on his passing, to be cremated and to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, which will happen tomorrow afternoon. This is something the family did ask me to address directly. and I'll do it briefly. Cremation hasn't always been our custom here in Winnipeg, and I have shared with the family that there is increasing acceptance of cremation, most certainly within the Reform movement and here at Temple Shalom, but also within the conservative and Orthodox halacha, since cremation is not specifically excluded in the Torah nor in any Jewish legal sources. And this is something, by the way, that the rabbis on the Winnipeg Council of Rabbis have talked about, and I'm on that council. We've talked about it. We know the halacha. Our local customs may say no, but it is actually not excluded. And I do want to let you know and affirm to you and to the family, this is a Jewish funeral. The reality of being Jewish is that we have many Jewish denominations that give us space to express our Judaism in different ways. And I've expressed my incredible appreciation and respect to Miriam and Carla and Cheryl for honoring and respecting their dad's wishes and his expressions of Judaism, much as he has always respected their lives and their life choices. In a microcosm, Izzy's story reminds us of the importance, especially as Jews, of celebrating our similarities and equally of respecting our differences. As I move to conclude, I keep going back to Carla's simple yet elegant description of her dad. He was a nice man. By the way, I ran into Nate Dana beforehand. He's a lifelong friend. He said, he was a really nice man. So it's not just from the family, it's all around you, that exact expression, very first words out of his mouth. So I would like to leave you with these final words. Izzy chose to live his life with intention, to live in the beautiful Jewish ideal as an Ish Yashar, and we heard about Mensch and other things. I'm choosing Ish Yashar, as a man walking a straight and good path. He was profoundly ethical and values-driven. He was a source of strength and support for everyone around him, always present, and in his own way having time to listen and just simply be there. He was a kind, compassionate, and loving son, father, and grandfather, as a husband, a partner, cherished friend, and a colleague, and he will remain in our hearts and thoughts eternally. May his name, Izzy Shor, the son of Jaime and Rose, Yitzchak ben Chaim v'Rachel, always be for a good memory. Can you hear that song? May it be God's will. So we will be concluding this part of the service shortly with the El Malei Rachamim, both in Hebrew and in English, and a recitation by the family and those who want to join in the Mourner's Kaddish as well. After that, we will witness the pallbearers accompanying Izzy to the hearse as he continues his last journey on this physical plane. But before doing so, I'd like to describe how this day and tomorrow will unfold as well. So after our procession and the departure of the hearse, you're all invited to join the family immediately after, downstairs, here at Temple Shalom for a meal of consolation. Tomorrow, interment will take place at Temple Shalom Cemetery, which is at Chapel Lawn, 4000 Portage Avenue, which is just west of the Perimeter Highway. The time is set for 3:30, get there a little bit early, and we will meet at the large funeral home near the back of the property, and then we'll simply walk over to the cemetery, the Temple Shalom Cemetery, which is very, very nearby. The family will be sitting Shiva at Izzy's condo, which is at 1275 Leila Avenue, Suite 1212. There'll be 3 openings set up right now. One is tonight from 7 to 9 o'clock, tomorrow morning, which is Friday, from 10 to 12, and again tomorrow evening from 7 to 9 o'clock. Jewish tradition also holds a beautiful custom of giving to charity when someone passes away and on anniversaries of their passing as well. There's a lot of beautiful traditions around it. Some suggest that the soul, whether he believes it or not, is quietly migrating towards the Garden of Eden and then climbing up the Garden of Eden towards the oneness, and that every time we give a gift, we nudge them along. It's about that simple. But it's most certainly when we give those gifts, we're reminded of the person, and may all their memories come back to flood in with us as well. So consider that as part of your way of honoring his presence. I'm going to move now to the Amale Rachamim. I'll do it in the Hebrew first and then follow it with the English. Can I ask you to please rise? El Male Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Ametzeh Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashkina Im Kedoshim Utahorim Mizahar Harakia Mazhirin Et Nishmat Yitzchak ben Chaim v'Rachel Shalach la'olamo Baal HaRachamim Yastirenu b'seter b'chonofav l'olamim V'yitzror Chaim et Nishmato Adonai hu nachalato V'yanuach b'shalom al kol mishkavo v'nomar Amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Izzy's memory be for us a blessing, that we may never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May Izzy Shore's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share not be severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace. And together let us say, Amen. I move now to the Mourner's Kaddish. It's a prayer that's written, please stay standing, please. I left sheets for the family. I'm going to do a short introduction in English. It's a prayer written in both English and Hebrew and Aramaic. And although at its face value it doesn't have any references to death and passing, there's actually all kinds of references from the source text behind it that suggest that it is a prayer that actually has us wishing and waiting for the next world to come when we will be reunited with our loved ones. So it is a very, very powerful prayer. It's got beautiful melody associated with it and beautiful poetry, even if we don't understand the fully the words. This is our custom here, my custom at least, is that rabbis tell us that if we don't know the prayer, but simply say Amen at the right time, it is as if we said the whole prayer. So what I'm going to do, for those of you who aren't particularly familiar with any of this, is I will simply raise my hand at the appropriate time, and I encourage you to simply add the word Amen to incorporate the prayers yourself as well. May the love and eternal connection of our souls give us strength as we turn to recite the words hallowed by time. Sanctifying the name of God, we honor the memory of Izzy Shor, Yitzchak ben Chaim v'Rachel, with the words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. And together, Yitkadal v'Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, v'Alma Divra Chirute v'Amlich Malchute, v'Chayechon u'v'Yomechon u'v'Chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'Agala u'v'Zman Kariv v'Imru, Amen. Yehe Shmei Rabbah Mevorach le'alam u'l'olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shmei dekudesha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'imru Amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. I'll read out the last two. Please be seated. I'm going to read out the last two blessings in English because they're universal and particularly appropriate to this time, not only peace in our households, but peace in the world. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life for us in Israel, to which we say, Amen. And may the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. We're going to be leaving momentarily to continue the escorting. Tomorrow we'll be finishing off the blessings graveside. I hope a number of you, if you're close to the family, feel free to join and support. And we're going to go right now to the processional out. I'd like to ask the pallbearers to leave through the front and the family to follow. And we'll join up at the casket. It's going to be difficult because of the nature of this building, because we're going out the back door for those of you to follow. But once the family is gone, please feel free to stand at the back door as you exit as well. Okay? So I'll ask the pallbearers to leave first, and I'll join you. And I look forward to seeing all of you downstairs in a few moments. Oh, I have one other thing to announce. Thanks, Ruth. If any of you have problems getting down to the main floor, Ruth Livingston is standing at the back there. Say hi, Ruth. There's Ruth. She will actually accompany anybody who needs to get downstairs to an elevator, which will take you to the basement level. Okay? So hang around for a little while if you need assistance to get. If you're concerned about taking 2 flights of stairs, Ruth will assist you in that regard. Got it? Thank you.